Hello. On the thresholds of a very important event, the 9th of May, I've decided to share some information with you about Kurt Vonnegut. He was a very famous American writer of the 20th century, a world-known writer, and I'd like you to listen to my presentation and maybe to answer some questions after it if you're interested in it. Unfortunately, his name, the name of Kurt Vonnegut, is forgotten now, and very few young people know who he was, and very few young people know about anything about his works. So, Kurt Vonnegut was born on the 11th of November in 1922. As for the genre he worked with, you can see it is satire, gallows humor, черный юмор, it is called also black humor, gallows это виселица, and science fiction, научная фантастика. The literary movement was postmodernism. The linguistic style was straightforward, conversational. He had concise sentences, сжатые предложения, and the language was rather simple. Kurt Vonnegut's family, his paternal grandfather settled in Indianapolis and founded the Vonnegut Company. Kurt Vonnegut descended from German immigrants, вел свой род от немецких иммигрантов. He was the youngest of 3 children, and he came from a rich family that went bankrupt, обанкротилась later because of the Great Depression. His mom's family owns their own brewery in a town, and his dad and his granddad were architects. They had their own firm, and several well-known buildings in the United States were built by the firm of Vonnegut's family. He wasn't taught to speak German or introduced to German literature and traditions. Why did it happen so? Because his parents abandoned the German culture, отказались от немецкой культуры after the First World War. They were very much disappointed, they were embarrassed of their origin, and they wanted to show their American patriotism. Parents didn't pay too much attention to him, and Kurt Vonnegut later in his interviews credited, поблагодарил his family's African-American cook, who taught him almost everything. And as he put it, she gave him the right values. Она привила ему ценности. She was very compassionate, and everything that was good about him came from her and from her upbringing. As for his early life, well, at school and at university, he played clarinet and was the editor of the school and university newspapers. He overcame stiff competition, преодолел жесткую конкуренцию, and he managed to become the editor of the newspaper. When he entered university, he wanted to become an architect as his dad and elder brother, but they wanted him to specialize in something more serious, and they insisted that he major in biochemistry. Major in, специализироваться на. In his opinion pieces, статьи мнений, he focused on pacifism, and he was against the United States intervention in the Second World War. And in this picture, you can see young Kurt Vonnegut reading a book, and the author is Dorothy Parker. It's also interesting because Dorothy Parker was very acclaimed novelist, writer, journalist of the 20th century, and she was known for her bitterness, желчность. The attack on Pearl Harbor brought the United States into the war. Атака привела США к войне. Kurt Vonnegut didn't want to participate in the war because he was a pacifist, but he knew that he had no choice, and he didn't wait till the moment when he was drafted into the army. Не стал дожидаться момента, пока его силой призовут в армию. So he decided to enlist in the army. Решил сам записаться в армию. He was trained to fire and maintain howitzers. Его учили стрелять и устанавливать гаубицы. He majored in mechanical engineering. It was in 1944. He returned home on leave. Вернулся домой на побывку for Mother's Day. And he discovered that his mother had committed suicide. Well, unfortunately, his mother had got some mental problems after their family went bankrupt. She wanted to become a successful writer, but she failed. She wanted also to maintain their status, and not even maintain, but to recreate their high status in the society, their social status. Again, she failed. She became very bitter, желчной, withdrawn, замкнутой, and she became abusive also. She expressed her hatred to Vonnegut's father, and his father during the Great Depression became somewhat like a dreamy artist. So she was inebriated, она была в состоянии алкогольного опьянения, and she took some medicine, combined it with alcohol, and committed suicide. In the December of 1944, Kurt Vonnegut fought in the Battle of the Bulge. Over 500 members of the division were killed and over 6,000 were captured. He was among those who were captured. He was captured with about 50 other American soldiers, and they were drafted to Dresden. On their way to Dresden, the boxcar, товарный вагон, where they were, was bombed by the Allied forces, союзными войсками. And it was just a mistake, and lots of people died. But again, Vonnegut managed to survive. He was sent to Dresden, the first fancy city he has ever seen. He loved it very much. In Dresden, there were no military factories. There were only cigarette factories, some factories that produced malt syrup, солодовый сироп, for pregnant women, and Vonnegut worked in some of these factories. So the Germans didn't expect Dresden to be bombed because it had no sense. Kurt Vonnegut lived there in a slaughterhouse, на скотобойне жил, and he worked in a factory that made malt syrup. On the 13th of February 1945, Dresden became the target of Allied forces. Дрезден стал мишенью для сил коалиции, сил НАТО. Here you can see a door which leads to this slaughterhouse number 5, and it is written in German here, Schlachthof 5. So, Kurt Vonnegut wrote his most acclaimed novel, роман, получивший наибольшее признание, Slaughterhouse 5 for the Children's Crusade, бойня номер 5 или крестовый поход детей. Well, you can see two pictures. In this picture, you can see an arm, maybe not an arm, a hand, and an eye on its hand. This creature is an alien from some planet that was created by Kurt Vonnegut in his book, in his novel. And Here you can see an inscription, надпись, so it goes. And in several novels by Kurt Vonnegut, you can see such an inscription. Into Russian it was translated as «такие дела». Да, такие дела. Sorry. It is very famous, and it is one of the signs of his literary style, maybe. As for the novel itself, it combines fiction, true events, and science fiction. It told readers about the bombardment of Dresden by Allied forces. It is an anti-war novel. Kurt Vonnegut remains a pacifist. It resonated with a generation marked by the Vietnam War. Нашло отклик у поколения, отмеченного Вьетнамской войной. As for some other works by Kurt Vonnegut, I should mention definitely Cat's Cradle, «Колыбель для кошки». It is a satirical postmodern novel with science fiction elements. It explores and satirizes issues of science, technology, the purpose of religion, and the arms race, гонка вооружений, often through the use of black humor. Kurt Vonnegut got his master's degree for this novel. Он получил степень магистра за этот роман. Another novel is Breakfast of Champions, Завтрак чемпионов. It is metafiction, and as for metafiction, it's a very interesting literary movement, which is characterized by the intrusion of the author into his novel. So you are reading about something about the creation of novel, the process of writing a novel, and then the author may intrude into his narration and comment on this process, and he may say to you, to the reader, well, something is wrong here, and I should have written it in some other way. То есть по-русски метафикшн — это тоже роман о романе, или когда рассказывает автор, например, комментирует процесс написания романа, он может прервать свой рассказ и сказать, концовка получилась неудачной, лучше-ка мне изменить ее. It is characterized by irony, sentimentality, black humor, and didacticism. Didacticism, по-русски тоже дидактизм. So it is when an author teaches somebody, he wants to teach his readers some values. Хочет преподать какой-то урок, научить моральным ценностям, если это, конечно, возможно, научить взрослого человека. Deals with the themes of free will, suicide, and race relations. It was published in 1973. The novel is full of drawings by the author, substituting descriptive language. Рисунки, заменяющие описательный язык, with depictions requiring no translations. Another novel is Welcome to the Monkey House, Добро пожаловать в обезьянник. It is a collection of 25 short stories, and it was published in 1968. They range from wartime epics to futuristic thrillers, given with satire. The themes of human nature and mid-20th century society. And the last novel by Kurt Vonnegut that I'd like to mention in my presentation is Mother Night, Мать тьма. The title of the book is taken from Goethe's Faust. It was published in 1962, and it is an allusion to this novel by Goethe. Again, it is metafiction. The novel takes the form of the fictional memoirs of Howard Campbell Jr., an American who moved to Germany in 1923 at the age of 11, and later became a well-known playwright and Nazi propagandist. And here you can see very interesting depiction. You can see Erin, siglet ring with the symbol of fascists, this fascist symbol, and the colors of the American flag. So this drawing reflects the idea of the novel that the protagonist was American who became, as it was claimed in the novel, he became an American spy in Germany, but many people thought, and they still think, that he was actually a betrayer. As for later life of Kurt Vonnegut, in 1945, 22-year-old Vonnegut married his high school girlfriend and classmate since kindergarten. He entered the university again and majored in anthropology. Later, he got a master's degree for his novel Cat's Cradle. He held a series of odd jobs, or he swapped jobs, менял работу очень часто, to support the family, чтобы финансово обеспечивать семью. He died in 2007 because of brain injury. Черепно-мозговая травма. Some interesting facts about Kurt Vonnegut. He had 3 biological children with his first wife. He adopted 3 of his sister's young sons after her death of cancer. And it was also a very sad moment in his life. His sister was dying of cancer, and her husband wanted to visit her in the hospital. He was going there, and on his way to the hospital, he got into a train crash. So her husband died in this train accident, and 2 days later, his wife, Vonnegut's sister, died of cancer, and Vonnegut adopted 3 of his sister's young sons. He attempted suicide in 1984. Совершил попытку самоубийства. His son was diagnosed as suffering from schizophrenia. Шизофрению диагноз поставили его сыну. He adopted a daughter with his second wife, so he had 3 biological and 4 adopted children. He graded all his books, and the highest marks were given to Cat's Cradle and Slaughterhouse No. 5. Ставил оценки книгам. He loved watching Cheers, an American sitcom, a comedy, and he made up epitaphs for himself. Сам себе делал эпитафии, придумывал. And here you can see an epitaph created by himself. Thanks for playing. Спасибо, что играл, или спасибо за игру. The New York Times прозвал Vonnegut the counterculture novelist, романист контркультуры. The Los Angeles Times, the author will rightly be remembered as a darkly humorous social critic and the premier novelist of the counterculture. The Science Fiction and Fantasy Hall of Fame inducted Vonnegut posthumously in 2015. The asteroids and the crater on the planet Mercury were named in his honor. And here you can see several quotations by Kurt Vonnegut that I'd like to comment on. Laughter and tears are both responses to frustration and exhaustion. I myself prefer to laugh, since there is less cleaning up to do afterwards. И смех, и слезы – это ответы на фрустрацию и очень сильное утомление. Я лично предпочитаю смеяться, поскольку после этого меньше убирать. Well, I think this quotation characterizes him as a person with a sense of humor. And I guess he suffered a lot in his life, but he preferred to look at his life on the bright side. And yes, he was definitely a depressed person, but he tried to hope for the better. Here we are, trapped in the ember of the moment. There is no why. И вот мы здесь, в ловушке этого янтаря, и нет никаких почему. So he compares us people to some insects, and we are like insects. We are trapped in the amber of the moment. То есть, попадая в смолу, смола потом застывает, превращается в янтарь, и вот насекомое застыло в этой смоле. То же самое и с людьми. And there is no why, so we shouldn't question the circumstances of our life and some bad moments of our life, and we should be tolerant and patient, maybe. The only proof he needed for the existence of God was music. Единственное доказательство существования Бога, которое ему было нужно, это музыка. Maybe he was right, but I'm personally not a musician, but he was. He played clarinet, and I agree with him, because if we speak about different kinds of arts, music is the only one that is acceptable. Not acceptable. Everyone can understand it. I mean, it is approachable. Any person can understand it and can feel it. We have to continually be jumping off cliffs and developing our wings on the way down. Нам приходится постоянно прыгать со скал и развивать наши крылья на пути вниз. I guess this quotation is very life certain. Kurt Vonnegut definitely wanted to teach us how to believe in ourselves and how to be positive despite anything that happens to us. And we need to evolve. The aim of our life is maybe to take risks and to evolve. Thank you for your attention. I highly recommend to you this novel, Mother Night, Cat's Cradle and Slaughterhouse No. 5. You should definitely read something about Kurt Vonnegut and by Kurt Vonnegut. Thank you. Bye.